We have a lower team power, but in this case, I don't think that's going to make a big difference. I think we're going to nuke them straight away. Now let's hope I didn't have too high confidence here. Hi guys, I'm Mike, and welcome to the ultimate arena guide for beginners in Raid Shadow Legends. The first thing you might want to ask yourself is, why do I want to play arena? Well, and the answer is very simple, luckily. That's because of the Great Hall. When you play arena, you will gain tokens, and these tokens can be traded in to upgrade your Great Hall. And when you upgrade something in your Great Hall, you will get a bonus to the stats of your champions anywhere in the game. And that's crucial, because if you have not leveled up your Great Hall, you are missing out on a lot of great stats. Like accuracy, for example. You can upgrade the accuracy of your magic champions, your spirit champions, your force champions, and your void champions. And you can do that by putting tokens into these. And like you can see, the first level will give you 5 accuracy, and you need to pay 50 bronze tokens for that, which you will earn in Bronze Arena. Level 4, for example, will cost you 400 silver tokens and will give you plus 20 accuracy in total. And the highest level, level 10, will cost you 1000 gold tokens, but it will give you 80 accuracy in total, which is a lot. So if you want to level up your champions anywhere in the game, then putting tokens into your Great Hall development is a great idea, and to earn these tokens you will need to play arena. As you might imagine, there's a couple of ways that you can play with your teams in arena. There's not just one tactic that works all the time, or one strategy. But the easiest tactic for beginning players is to make sure that your team goes first and then kill the other team before they get a chance to move. This is the simplest tactic that there is, and it even works further along in the game. But to make sure that your team kills the other team before they have a go actually requires a couple of things. And I will talk to you about what you need today and help you with the team setup for your arena offense team. But you can also use this team in your defense. Because let's just take a look at arena. When you go in here, then you will see a list of teams that you can fight. And as you can see, these teams have a statistic which is called team power. This is an indication of how strong the team is. But it doesn't say everything, to be honest. But you will learn in time which champions you can fight easily and which champions are very difficult to fight. But this is something that you will need to learn from experience. But as you can see here, you have the possibility to battle, and this is going to be your arena offense. So if we go in there, then you will see that I have a team set up over here. And to give these guys instructions, you can use the team setup section. Here you can actually decide what moves your champions prioritize, and this is going to be very helpful when setting up your main arena team. So we're going to take a look at that a little bit later. And also you have a section which is called defense, and here you will find your defensive team. This is the team that people will see in their own overview of battles when they are going to try and fight your team. So this is a team that you can set up as well. And you can do that in the same way that you do with your arena offense team. So you can prioritize which moves they have to do at a certain time. So this will help your defensive team greatly in winning battles as well. But first let's look at the basics. To create a team which will always go first and destroy the enemy team, there's a couple of components that you will need. One of which is a champion that has a speed aura. And the speed aura, actually, like you can see here, gives you, for example, my Arbiter has an aura skill which increases ally speed in arena battles by 30%. And the opposing player has an aura skill on Skull Crown which increases ally speed in arena battles by 23%. Well, of course, if you guys have the same speed on your gear and my Arbiter has 30% boost and his Skull Crown has a 23% boost, then my arbiter is going to go first. So then we have won the speed race, and that's what we're trying to do here. We want to go first so we can take out the other team before they get a chance to move. The aura lead is regrettably not all that you need to win the speed race. It is always a good idea to have a champion in your team that can boost your speed even further by putting a speed buff on your team, and if at all possible also gives them a boost turn meter or decreases the turn meter of the enemy team. But these abilities are very important so that your entire team will go before the enemy team. Because if you have a very, very fast speed lead, then that's all great, and that champion will probably go first. But if the rest of your team is way slower than the fastest champion of the enemy team, then the enemy might interrupt you and cut in and take out your entire team before the rest of your team gets a go. So it's very important to boost the turn meter of your team or give them a speed buff so they will go before the enemy team. The third part of this composition will be an increase attack champion. Because like you may expect, an increase attack buff makes sure that your champions will do more damage when they attack the enemy. So this is a nice way to increase the chance of taking down the enemy team in one go. The fourth component is maybe even more important than the increase attack buff, and it is a decrease defense debuff. You have champions in this game that can decrease the defense of the enemy team, and this will greatly increase the damage that you will do on the enemy team with any champion. So this is a really nice debuff, and if you want to take out the enemy team in one go, it is absolutely crucial to have this role on your team. The last thing that your team will need is a Nuker, and it's actually a really easy role. It's just a champion that will do a lot of damage on the enemy team, and preferably on all of the enemy team, not just on one champion. So if you get a Nuker that has a good AoE attack that does a lot of damage, then this champion will be able to fit the role of Nuker. Before we take a look at a couple of champions that can fit the roles that we described, I want to discuss a couple of things that you will need to keep in mind. One thing that's very important is that the order in which you will have your champions go is very important. Because if you have the speed booster of your team go last, then that's no use. Because if everyone already went, then there's no use in boosting their speed anymore. So what you want to do is make sure that the turn meter booster or speed buffer always goes first. So make sure that they will have the highest speed of your team. After that, it is a good idea to have the increase attack champion go. Because normally this is not an ability that does damage to the enemy team, it just provides a buff on your own team. But if you do, this will increase the damage that the next champion will do in the row, and that's going to be the decreased defense champion. And so after the increased attack champion, the decreased defense champion must go. Because if the decreased defense champion will go after the Nuker, then the Nuker will have done a lot less damage and the defense will be down after the Nuker has already gone. So that's not a good idea. And after that, your Nuker can go and hopefully clear up the enemy team. It is very important to realize though that even though you might have a really fast speed booster champion and maybe even a very fast increase attack champion and decrease defense champion, if your Nuker or anyone else on the team is way slower than your speed booster, then the opponent may have a chance to cut in and cut off your team and kill them before you can have the rest of your champions go. So it's very important that the champions do not have too high differences in speed. And to make sure that your team will not be interrupted, you can take a look at deadwoodjedi.com, where they have an arena speed calculator. And you can check whether or not your team has the possibility to be interrupted. And if you make sure that the speeds all line up, then you will not be interrupted, and so in fact you will probably not be defeated by another team trying to do the same tactic. When picking out your champions for these roles in the team, you will notice that some champions actually combine a couple of the steps that we need to kill the enemy team. So this is always a good thing. If you have the chance to combine an aura lead with a speed booster and also an increased attack, for example, then that is great, because this frees up the possibility of adding a second nuker, for example, making it a little bit easier for you to kill the enemy team in one go. It's also pretty obvious that you are going to depend on what champions you already have. But one thing that's very important to remember is that as long as you have all of these requirements set, then you will have a good chance of actually defeating an enemy team that is just a random collection of champions that are not aligned well. So always try to assemble a team that has all the roles that you need, and then you will have a good chance that you will win a lot in the arena. A good thing to realize is that not all decrease defense debuffs and all increase attack buffs, for example, are the same. There are higher and lower versions. For example, Stag Knight has the high version of decreased defense, 60%. The low version actually is just 30%. So make sure that you will have champions that have a very high chance of landing the debuff that they are going to use, or land the buff that you want. But also make sure that you have the highest version of these available, because this will make a huge difference on the damage that you will do. Obviously, there are a lot more skills in this game besides increase attack buffs, decrease defense debuffs, speed boosts, and these other abilities can be very useful as well. But for this composition, they will not be a priority. It is never a bad thing to have a good resurrection champion on your team, for example, or someone that has a lot of control like stuns and provokes, but these are not the priority for this kind of team. You just need to fill the roles that we have, and if you do, then you will have a better chance of winning. Like I said before, it is very important to make sure that the roles that you have in your team are actually going in the right order. But a very important thing to realize is that your speed booster will need to be the fastest of your team. Oftentimes they don't need accuracy at all. Sometimes they do if they want to land a debuff as well. But it's actually the first priority to get a lot of speed on this champion. So go for speed substats that are as high as possible. And also go for item sets like the speed set or the divine speed set, or perhaps even perception if you need to land debuffs. But these will give you extra boosts to your speed, because like you can see here, perception, for example, gives a speed boost of plus 5% if you have 2 artifacts of this set. A speed set item, if you have 2 items of this set, will give you a speed boost of 12%. The same goes for divine speed. So if you are gearing up your speed booster, then put all the speed that you have on them. Also, of course, give them speed boots. And this will make sure that they are as fast as they can be, so you will have the best chance of going first against the enemy team. When gearing an increased attack champion, luckily you will only need to build them with speed as well. Just a little bit less speed than the speed booster, but if you build them speedy, then they will be able to do their ability after the speed booster and before your decreased defense champion, which will need a little bit more. And that's because a decreased defense champion will need to land his ability on the opposing team. And this means that your champion is going to need high accuracy to make sure that he actually lands his ability on the defensive team. So in this case, you will need to have speed on them, no doubt. You will need to have enough speed so that he will go after the increased attack champion, but before the nuker. And also a high accuracy so they will be able to land their ability. In this case, like you can see, my decreased defense champion is Deacon Armstrong in this example. And he has an accuracy of 434, which is quite high. And then lastly, when you gear out your nuker, then you will have to focus on doing as much damage as possible, which means that you will be going for a crit rate of 100% if possible. as high crit damage as you can get, and also for a high attack, because these three factors will decide how much damage you will do. So when looking at the specific slots, this will mean that you will be going for crit damage gauntlets or crit rate. If you are a little bit more in the beginning of the game, you will probably not have the ability to get crit damage gauntlets on your champion and still get to 100% crit rate, which is really important. But later on in the game, you will absolutely want to switch to crit damage gloves. You will need attack percentage chest piece, and speed boots are usually needed to make sure that your nuker will still be able to go before the enemy team cuts in. To make your champions even stronger, it is obviously always a good idea to go for their masteries as well. But because this is very dependent on what champions you have and what works best for you, I would advise you guys to take a look at hellhades.com. You can look up any champion there, and you can take a look at what Hell Hades suggests that you use as masteries for that champion in PvP content. So that's a way that you can actually figure out what masteries would be best for your champions and your build, because this will help your champions do the things they need to do greatly. A final thing to take into account when fighting in the arena is the affinity of the champions that you are using and the affinity of the champions that you are fighting. Because, well, as you know, void champions do not have a weak affinity or a strong affinity to fight against. They are completely neutral, which makes them useful against any champion. But a spirit champion is weak against a magic champion, while a magic champion is actually weak against a force champion. And this also means that you will have a chance of doing a weak hit against your weak affinity. And it also decreases the chance that you will land any debuffs on those champions. So always keep in mind that, for example, when you are fighting with a team that consists entirely of spirit champions and you will fight a team which consists of entirely magic champions, that you will have a very hard time probably. But it's the other way around if you are fighting a team of force champions with your spirit affinity team, because then you will have a good chance that you will win, because they will have the weak affinity against you. So keep this in mind when picking your fights in the arena. Another thing that is useful to look at when picking your opponents is the team power of the opposing team. It does not say everything. If your team has a lower power, this does not mean that you will automatically lose, but especially at the beginning of the game, it is usually the case that if someone has a lot higher power, then their team is geared a lot better and you will have a hard time killing them. But there are more factors in play, like you will see here. For example, they have a different aura skill than I'm using. So I have an increased speed aura and the opponent has an increased HP aura. In this case, that would probably mean that I will be going first. And in this case, I'm pretty confident that we could kill these guys before they get to strike us back. But these are the kind of things that you need to look for. And if you are not yet familiar with a lot of the champions inside the game, then it's often a good idea to compare your team power with that of the opponent. And if your team power is higher, then you will probably have a chance to take them down. Before we take a look at a couple of champions that would fit the roles that we just described, I want to do a little bit of a disclaimer, because I will absolutely not discuss all great champions for these roles. There are just too many of those. So I will give you a couple of examples for beginners, for people that are a little bit further along in the game, and for people that are maybe even beyond that after that. So, but do realize that this is just a small pick of champions and that there are lots more options. If you want to find any champions to fit certain roles, then I would suggest you use the website ayumilove.net. And on this website, you can actually click on any ability and then you will see what champions have those abilities. So be sure to check that out and make your own compositions. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to take a look at all 5 roles, and I will discuss 3 levels of champions within those roles. I will give you a couple of options and show you why those champions would be a good fit for those roles. I will mostly try to find champions that fit multiple roles, but this is not always possible, especially when you're a little bit more of a beginner. Also, the lower tier that I will discuss will consist mostly of rares. The middle tier will be mostly epics, and the highest tier will be mostly legendaries. So we're just going to dive straight in with the speed lead champions, which means the champion that has a speed aura. So the first champion, which is actually easily accessible for everyone, is Spirit Host. Spirit Host has an aura ability which increases the speed in all battles by 10%. This is not a high boost, but it's better than nothing. So if you have no alternative, she's very good at this. And one more thing that she's really good at, and that's an awesome ability to have here as well, increase attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So she actually fits 2 roles in one champion, because she has the speed aura and also the increased attack buff on all allies. So this is actually a very decent champion when you're just starting out, and she's also farmable in campaign, so that makes it even better. A second option for you would be a rare from the Lizardman faction. And this rare is going to be a void rare, regrettably, but it's Haruspex. And Haruspex has an increased ally speed in arena battles by 15%. So like you can see, he has a little bit higher boost than Spirit Host, which makes him pretty decent at this role. But what makes him even better is that he also has a turn meter boost of all allies and an increased speed buff. So he actually fits 2 of the slots that we need again. This is a turn meter booster and an aura lead. And on top of that, he also has a revive. So this champion is pretty versatile and could be a nice fit for a beginner arena team. But like I said, he is a void, so you are going to have to be a little bit lucky to have this guy. Number 3 for beginners would be a rare from the Sacred Order, and that's Mother Superior. Mother Superior has an aura that increases ally speed in all battles by 13%, which is decent. It's a little bit higher than Spirit Host, and a disadvantage of Mother Superior is that she doesn't fit any of the other roles in the team. She does have a heal, which is okay, but like I said, abilities other than the ones that we need for the roles of the team are not as important. So she has a heal, that's nice, but it's all about her aura in this case, which is a 13% speed aura. And if you have no alternatives, this is a good option for you to use. A fourth option will be a rare from the Knights Revenant faction. And that's going to be Mages. Where is she? There she is. She has an aura that increases ally speed in arena battles by 16%. So she has a specific speed aura for arena, which is great. Otherwise, she doesn't bring anything to the table. But if you have no other aura speed leads, then this is a great option for you to use at the beginning of the game. For the last option that I want to present to you guys, we need to go back to the Sacred Order again, and we are going to take a look at Hospitaller, because she also has a speed aura similar to Spirit Host, which is only just 10%. But in this case, she brings a little bit more to the table. And like Spirit Host, she also has a second role to fill, because she has an increased speed on your allies, which is also a nice thing to have, because this will make sure that your team will not be interrupted by the enemy team. So that's great. And it also increases the crit rate of your team by 15%, making it a little bit easier for you to get to 100% on your Nuker, for example. So this is great. The next set of champions will be a little bit more powerful than the first set that we looked at, because they were really aimed at beginners. Now we are going to take a look at some of the champions that you will probably get when you are a little bit further along in the game, which will increase the power of your team quite a lot. And the first champion that we are going to take a look at is the champion that you will get after 30 days of logging in, which is High Katoon. and we will find her here in the Barbarians faction. She actually has a speed aura in all battles by 19%. So this is already higher than all the champions that we discussed in the previous list of 5 champions. And this is great, but it is even better that she also has a turn meter boost and an increased speed buff on her. So this makes her an ideal arena lead for you when you are 30 days into the game. So this is a great champion, and you will all be able to use her after 30 days of logging in. So this is a great option for you. The next champion is going to be an incredible speed aura lead as well, because he does a lot of things in one. And that's going to be Deacon Armstrong. Because this guy not only has the same aura that Haikatoon has, but he also has a filled turn meter and decreased turn meter of all enemies. But like you can see here, he gets an extra turn after that. And guess what? He can also do a decreased defense debuff. So this guy is absolutely insane. He combines 3 roles in one champion, making him incredibly versatile. So this would absolutely be a huge pull for you. And if you get this guy, be sure to put him in your arena team. He will not disappoint you. Coming up next is a Void Epic from the Knights Revenant faction. And a Void Epic, I realize that this is a very hard champion to get. I don't even have her yet. But this is a nice champion to have in your team for the role of Speed Aura lead. Because she has an increased ally speed in arena battles by 23%. And not only that, Skullcrown can also fit the role of Nuker very well, because she has one of the hardest AoE nukes in the game. So this is again a champion that combines 2 roles, making her a great addition to any arena team. Next up will be the Undead Hordes, where we will find Gorgorab. And Gorgorab also has an increased speed aura by 23% in arena battles, which is really nice. But luckily, that's not all. Like Deacon, he combines 3 roles in one champion, because he also has an ability that fills the turn meter of all allies and places the high version of increased attack on all allies. So this guy is an incredible addition for you if you are a little bit further along in the game and you are trying to increase the power of your arena team. And for the final champion we are going to go to the Banner Lords faction, because there we will find Archmage Helmet, which is a champion that you can collect by playing Doom Tower normal. And as you can see, this guy also has an increased speed aura in arena battles by 17%, which is decent. But he also has an increased speed buff combined with an increased crit rate buff and crit damage buff. So this will help your nuker a lot, doing more damage. You can even build them with a lower amount of crit rate, focusing more on crit damage, which is of course incredible. And the increased speed buff will help make sure that your team goes first. So that's great. It's really an awesome champion for this role as well. And now we are going to take a look at some of the champions that you will have later in the game. Perhaps you could be lucky and pull them early on. But these guys have a higher chance of being on higher level teams. So the first champion that we are going to look at is Arbiter. You can earn Arbiter by completing missions, so you will probably be able to have her once you're a little bit further along in the game. But this champion is amazing for Arena, and I will show you why. The first thing is the increased ally speed aura by 30% in arena battles. This is very, very high. There's just one champion that has it a little bit higher, but this is incredible. And also, she has an increased attack buff on all allies. But that's not all. It also fills the turn meter of all allies by 30%. So this is again a champion that combines 3 roles. She has an aura, she has an increased attack buff, and she boosts the turn meter of all allies. So this champion is absolutely mental. This is also the reason why you see her a lot in Gold 4 in the arena, because she's just so incredibly good. Next up will be the Demon Spawn faction, where we will find Prince Kaimar. And Prince Kaimar is a champion that has, like Arbiter, an increased ally speed in arena battles aura by 30%. So that's incredible. It's a fantastic aura. And besides his aura, he actually has a very unique ability as well, which resets the cooldowns of all ally skills, but that's not that relevant over here. What is useful is the fills turn meter of all allies except this champion by 20%. So this makes him a useful speed booster as well. Like you can see, the 30% aura, of course, makes him an incredible addition to any arena team. The third champion is actually also a legendary from the Demon Spawn faction, and that's Lord Shazar. And here's the champion that has a higher speed aura than Arbiter and Prince Kaimar. And you can see here, it's 32%. It's just 2%, you might say, and you'd be right. But still, this can make a difference when you are very, very high level and all the opponents actually have the same kind of gear as you have. So then the 2% might just be able to give you the difference that you need. Regrettably, he does not have any other abilities that fit the roles that we need in this team. So if you would pick Lord Shazar, it would only be because of the ally speed aura in arena battles by 32%. And it's getting a bit boring, but we are going to stay with the Demon Spawn faction for a fourth option that I would suggest, which is actually not someone that has such a huge speed aura, but can make a great difference for your team, and that is Duchess Lilitu. And she has a speed aura comparable to the ones that Deacon Armstrong and Haikatoon have, of 19%, but she is also a champion that is capable of keeping your team alive very well. And she can actually fit 2 roles on your team, because she does not only have the aura, she also has an increased attack buff on all allies, so that's great. And like you can see here, a block debuffs buff and a perfect veil buff. She does so much to keep your team alive, and if they die, she can actually bring them back again as well. So this is a champion that will be very, very good for your arena team too. She's just a little bit less of a great fit for a team that just wants to go first and destroy the enemy team before they get a go. Next up on the list are the turn meter boost or speed buff champions that we can use in our team. And the first one that we have on the list is a champion that we already took a look at, and that's Haruspex. So for a beginner, Haruspex is actually really decent because he has the aura and also has the fills turn meter of all allies and the increased speed buff. So this is a good champion, and because he fits 2 roles, he's actually a pretty awesome champion to have. To get this champion out of the way as well, we are going to take a look at the Sacred Order again, and we are going to take a look at Hospitaller one more time, because like I said, she doesn't only have the speed aura, but she also has the increased speed buff. So this makes her a good fit for 2 roles, and that is always nice to have, especially at the beginning of the game, since there are not a lot of champions then that have the capability to fit 2 roles. The next champion a lot of people actually consider to be a legendary when looking at his skills, but it is absolutely just a rare, and that's Apothecary. And Apothecary is a good addition to starter teams in the arena because he has an increased speed buff on all allies and a filled turn meter of all allies by 15%. So if you have this guy, he's a pretty decent addition to a team. He just doesn't fit 2 roles. Now we're going to visit the Demon Spawn faction again. And in the Demon Spawn faction we will find Diabolist. And Diabolist is a champion that's farmable, because you can get her in campaign, which is really nice. And Diabolist is a nice addition to any arena team, because she has an increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. And she also has another ability, which fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. So she's actually a very nice rare to have in an arena team, especially early on in the game. Next up is a champion from the Undead Hordes faction, and that's going to be Doomscreech. He is a void rare, so that's a little bit more difficult to get, but he has a very nice ability which fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% and also increases defense by 60% on all allies. And like I said, these kind of abilities are just secondary, so nice to have, but not needed. But the fill turn meter of all allies by 30% is very good, so you can always use Doomscreech if you do not have another speed booster in your collection. So we're going to take a step up again, and we are going to see a couple of champions that we also saw in the speed aura lead position. Because Heike Toon will actually come by here as well. She has the turn meter boost and increased speed buff, like I said. So she is a great champion that fits 2 roles. The same goes for Deacon Armstrong, which actually even fits 3 roles with his speed aura, with his decreased defense, which we will come by later, and the turn meter boost that he has. So he's a great champion for this position as well. The third champion we have seen before as well, and this is Gorgorab, because Gorgorab not only has the increased speed aura, he also has the fill turn meter of all allies by 15% and the increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, fitting 3 roles. So that's a great champion. And for the next champion we do not need to go far, because that's actually going to be Seeker. And Seeker is a great champion to have on your squad too, because he fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% and places an increased attack buff on all allies, so he fits 2 roles. This also grants him an extra turn, giving him a chance to provoke one of the enemies. And again, things like provoke are nice, but they are secondary to the roles that we absolutely need to fill in this team. Our last visit in the mid-tier section of speed boosters will be in the Orcs faction, because there we will find York. And Old Hermit York has an ability that increases the attack on all allies and also increases the turn meter of all allies. So he combines 2 roles as well, which makes him a very nice addition to your arena team. And now for the higher region of turn meter boosters, we are going to take a look at Arbiter again, because Arbiter actually has the increased attack buff, which combines with a turn meter boost, making her an incredible champion. And the same goes for Kaimar, which we also noticed had a turn meter boost on his ability. Here, fills the turn meter of all allies except this champion. So Kaimar is an incredible turn meter booster too. But now we are going to take a look at another really big cannon, and this is actually Lydia, the Death Siren. Lydia is a reward that you can earn by clearing all Faction War stages on 3 stars, which is one hell of an undertaking, but after you've done that, you have gained one of the best champions in the game, no doubt. And like you will see, she has an ability which is completely insane if you ask me. Let's take a look. She has an attacks all enemies attack, which has a chance of placing a decreased defense debuff, which is great, but also a weaken debuff, increasing the damage that they will take even further. And next to that, it also gives an increased speed buff on all allies. So this is like a sick ability with these kind of debuffs on there, and these buffs combined, it's just completely mental. But this is probably the reason why you need to clear all Faction War stages on 3 stars. It will cost you such a lot of time to do that, but the reward is absolutely stunning. She's fantastic in the arena because of this incredible ability, and she can be a very nice addition to any team trying to nuke down the other team first. The final champ is absolutely not a champ that's easy to get either, but it's going to be Siphi, because Siphi also has a turn meter boost on her and an increased speed buff on all allies. So this makes her a really useful champion for this role as well. Moving on to the increased attack champions, we are going to see a familiar face again, because when we are looking at the lower tier of increased attack champions, we will have Spirit Host in there, no doubt. Spirit Host also has the increased speed aura, so making her fit 2 roles, and because she's a campaign farmable champion, she absolutely is a nice addition to your team. Someone that we did not take a look at yet is going to be Grinner, because Grinner also has an ability that can increase the attack of your champions. it's just a good thing to know that the chance that he will land it is not very high. So he is not as reliable as a spirit host, for example. But still, if you don't have anyone to increase your attack, you could use this guy, but you might be better off just putting a second nuker in then, because this is a really low chance of landing. So it is an option, and he also has a revive, which is nice. But if you really want an increased attack champion and you don't have any other options, then you could use Grinner. The last option in the beginner tier is going to be a champion from the Shadowkin faction, and that's Fanatic. Because Fanatic, like Spirit Host, has an ability that increases attack on all allies for 2 turns, and you have a 100% chance of placing it. So no funny business like with Grinner. So this champion is actually an option if you are shy on an increased attack champion and you really want to fit that role. In the mid tier, luckily we have a couple more options, and we are going to take a look at one that we have already seen before, and that's Seeker. Because Seeker, like we noticed, has an ability that not only increases the turn meter of all allies, but also places an increased attack buff on all allies. So this is an awesome combination of abilities, and I would say that Seeker would be a very nice addition to any arena team. The next increased attack option is going to be a Void epic from the Bannerlords faction, and that's Ursala the Mourner. Ursala is a great champion that also has revive all dead allies, but if our tactic works, then hopefully no one will die. So I hope she will not be needing this ability. And she does have this. Attacks all enemies, has a chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff. All fine. But it's all about this one for us, and that's the 50% increase attack buff on all allies. So she fits that role and actually gives you a little bit of security in case your team does not kill the opposing team at once. She can save the day by actually pulling everyone back from the dead, and then perhaps you can get a go again, because she will also fill the turn meters by 50%, so you will have a chance to strike again. Next up for increased attack is someone that we saw before as well. It's going to be Gorgorab again, because like we noticed, not only an increased turn meter, but also an increased attack buff, making him an awesome addition to a team that is trying to kill the other team first. And lastly, there's Old Hermit York again, because Old Hermit York increases the attack of all allies and combines it, like Gorgorab, with a turn meter boost. An option that I almost forgot is actually an epic from the Sacred Order, which is Mordecai. Mordecai has an HP burn AoE, which also increases the attack on all allies. So this is a bit of a weird combination, but it can work out for you. So Mordecai is an option for an increased attack champion. And then for the higher tier, again, we are going to take a look at Arbiter, but luckily for the last time, because this is the last role that she can also fill. She has the increased attack buff on the same move that increases the turn meter of all allies. So that she fits 3 roles makes her one of the best champions in the entire game for Arena, no doubt. Next up, we'll take a quick visit to Duchess again, because Duchess also has the ability to increase attack of all allies. So this is the second role that she can fill, and this makes her a nice addition to any team trying to kill the other team first. And now we are going to take a look at the first dwarf on the list, and this is going to be Under Priest Brogni, because Brogni also has an ability that increases attack on all allies. And this buff makes him a nice addition to teams like the one that we are trying to build today. We are going back to the Dark Elves faction for the next one, and this is going to be Ghostborn. Ghostborn is a champion that has a decreased defense debuff, which cannot be resisted, making him a really awesome decreased defense champion. But like you can see here, he combines this ability with an increased attack buff. So this makes him very, very useful because he not only has the increased attack buff, but also a decreased defense debuff, making him fit 2 roles of our team. So this is a great, great, great champion that you can use in these kind of teams. And the last one is going to be the first skinwalker on the list, and that's Brachus. Brachus has the ability to increase attack on all allies, and he's actually a pretty decent champion after that as well. So should you not be able to kill them in one go, this guy has an ability which can revive him when he dies, and then he can go immediately and absolutely slaughter whoever he attacks then, because it's like an insane amount of damage that he does then. So Brachus is actually a nice option for an increased attack champion. Just 2 more roles to go. First we're going to take a look at decreased defense options. And for the first one we are going to take a look at the good options for beginners again. And we will find one in the Barbarians faction. And this is actually a champion that you can farm in campaign. This is going to be War Maiden, of course. War Maiden has an ability that's called Crumbling Blast. It attacks all enemies and has a chance of placing the large version of decreased defense for 2 turns, making her a very nice fit for the decreased defense slot on our team. Next up is another dwarf, and we are going to take a look at Kurzat Deepheart. Kurzat is a void rare, so a little bit harder to get, but he has an AoE decreased defense. But, like you can see, and this is very important to notice, he just has the small version of decreased defense. So, only use this champion when you have no options available with the high version. Because like you can see, 30% compared to the 60% on the high version, this is going to make a huge difference. So if you have the chance to put someone in here with a 60% decreased debuff, then I would always suggest that you use that champion. Next up is another void rare, and we are going to find her in the Bannerlords faction, and that's Dagger. Dagger is a decent fit for the decreased defense slot on any arena team, and that's because she has this ability, Precision Sabotage, but it only has, when booked, a 75% chance of landing, which is not as good as the 100% from War Maiden, of course. But Dagger is a void affinity, making her a good matchup against anybody. So they both have their pros and cons. But if you don't have anyone else, then I would absolutely suggest using Dagger for the decreased defense position. Another option that has regrettably only the low version of decreased defense is Bellower. And it's getting a bit of a trend here. It's another void rare. Because like you can see here, he has an A3 that attacks all enemies, and it has a 75% chance of decreasing the attack of the enemies and decreasing the defense of the enemies. But this is, like I said, the smaller version. This could be a little bit of a problem, because we absolutely prefer to have the high version on there. But because Bellower has all AoE attacks, this is actually a champion that you might want to consider anyway, because he also has a decreased speed debuff on his other attack, and his A1 actually has the chance to block active skills, making sure that your opponents will have to use their A1s against you. And this will probably not be the attacks that will kill you straight away. So he is quite versatile. I do prefer champions that have the high version of decreased defense, but like I said, if you have no other options, he is actually pretty decent at it. Last stop will be the Undead Hordes again, where we will find the champion called Banshee. And like you notice, the beginner section of the decreased defense champions is not all that impressive, because the champions do not have a high percentage chance to land their abilities, for example, or they have the low version of decreased defense, or, as in the case of Banshee, they have the low version and the low chance to land it. So there are just not a lot of options within the rares for beginners that have a decreased defense debuff on all enemies. But if you have no one else, decreased defense is very important. And you could use Banshee, although she just has a 30% chance of placing the low version of decreased defense on all enemies. Luckily, when we go up a little bit, we will find a lot more champions with the abilities that we need For example, we are going to take a look at a Bannerlord's epic, and this is of course going to be Stag Knight. Stag Knight is one incredible champion in this game, which has a 95% chance of landing a decreased defense debuff, but if you give him the right masteries, it will be pumped to 100%. And this guy is really, really good at it, because he has the 60% and 100% chance to land it. And on top of that, he also decreases the attack, which is a nice bonus, but not something that we were looking for. But Stag Knight is absolutely a very, very strong champion for the decreased defense role. Next up is going to be the epic that we already saw 2 times on this list, which is Deacon Armstrong. Because, like we noticed, he also has the decreased defense debuff, the high version, and a 100% chance of landing on his A2, which he will be able to do in the first time that he goes, because of time compression. So Deacon is a fantastic champion for any arena team, and I would actually prefer this guy to someone like Stag Knight, because he brings a little bit more to the table. Going to visit the orcs again. Here we go. We are going to try and find Zargala, which is a Force Affinity epic from the Orcs faction, and she has an ability called Crack Armor. This ability attacks all enemies 3 times, and after the first hit, the attacks have a chance of 75% when booked of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff, and this is what we are looking for. Next to that, she's actually a pretty decent nuker as well. So this is absolutely a good option for the decreased defense slot in your arena teams. We're going to visit the Ogrin tribes for once, and we are going to do that for the next 2 champions on this list, because a very good option for decreased defense is the epic called Siege Hulk. Because Siege Hulk, with his Thrashing Fit ability, can increase the attack on himself, which is nice of course, but he also has a 100% chance of landing decreased defense on the opposing team, which is really, really good. Also, his damage output is very high for a decreased defense champion, so he is actually kind of a secondary nuker in that sense, and this is a very, very good champion that you can use in arena. Next up is Ugo. And Ugo is another one of those champions that has a decreased defense, which is great, 100% chance to land, and the big version, so very good. But this champion also has a chance of placing a block buffs debuff on all enemies. It is something that we do not need to fit the roles of the team, but it's never bad to have. Should your opposing team actually survive the first nukes, then they will not be getting any buffs. Okay, lastly we're going to take a look at the highest tier again. And we are going to visit a couple of champions that we saw before. Because for one, we are going to take a look at Ghostborn. Because Ghostborn actually combines the decreased defense debuff that we are looking for with an increased attack buff that we also need on the team. So Ghostborn is absolutely a great addition. Especially because his decreased defense cannot be resisted. So this is very, very nice. Funnily enough, we are going to stay with the Dark Elves for now. But we are not even going to take a look at a legendary now. We are going to take a look at an epic. It is a Void epic, but she is fantastic. There is actually almost no better champ than her in the game that can do this. So let's take a look. Madame Ceres, of course. Midnight Ritual is what she's all about. She removes all buffs from enemies and then places a decreased attack debuff, which is nice, but also the 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies. But the remove all buffs part is very nice as well, because there are loads of teams out there that have shields on them. And those shields will take away a lot of the damage that you will do on that team. So if you just strip the shield first and then decrease the defense and then nuke them, then you will have gained a lot with her. Madame Ceres is one of the best epics in the game, and actually one of the best arena champions in the game, even including legendaries. So if you have her, you will have an incredible champion for this type of team. And it's like Dark Elves have a monopoly on this or something, but we are going to take a look at Lydia here as well. Because Lydia, like we noticed before, combines the increased speed buff on all allies, boosting their speed, and a decreased defense debuff combined with a weaken, further increasing the damage that your opponent will receive. So Lydia is completely mental in this role. You can absolutely get a lot out of her, and if you have her, I would absolutely suggest that you use her in this role. Last up is a legendary from the Sacred Order faction, and this is going to be Venus, because Venus also brings to the table a decreased defense debuff, the high version of course, combined with a weaken debuff, further increasing the damage that the opponent receives. So if you have need of a decreased defense champion and you don't have many other options available, then Venus can actually be a really good addition to your team. So after all of that, we have arrived at the final role in the team, which is the role of Nuke. And for beginners, I would suggest actually 4 champions that are really easy to get, and that's just because you can pick any one of them at the beginning of the game. So the starter champions are the ones that I would suggest using as your nuker in the arena when you are starting out. In this case that would be Elhain, for example. And she has 2 AoE abilities, making her a really nice fit for an arena team. And also of course we have the Dark Elf Kael, or Kael I need to say nowadays. There we go. He has Acid Rain, which attacks all enemies, and it has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, making it easier to build him with a 100% crit rate for his AoE. Next up is Galek from the Orcs faction, and Galek also has an AoE attack just like all the others. And last up will be Aethel, which we will find in the Sacred Order faction. And like you can see, she also has an attacks all enemies ability, which has a 50% extra chance of inflicting a critical hit, just like Kyle. So yeah, these guys are absolutely well suited for the role of Nuker at the beginning of the game, and I think replacing those early on will be quite difficult. But if you're a bit further along and you want to take it up a notch, then there are of course a couple options available. When we go to the Undead Hordes, for example, there we will find Dark Elhain. Dark Elhain is a champion that you will also get after I think 120 days of logging in. But you could also pull her from a shard perhaps. But she does quite a lot of damage. So using her a little bit further along in the game as your arena nuker is absolutely not a bad idea. Another nice option, which is regrettably a void again, is going to be Umbral Enchantress. Umbral Enchantress has very hard hitting AoE ability, but this ability actually brings a lot more to the table. This ability has a 100% chance when booked to place a provoke, and it makes herself unkillable, and also places a block active skills buff on her, so she can't use her A2 after that, but you won't want to because she's just going to be a distraction for the rest of the team. But our goal is to use her to nuke down the opposing team in one go, and she is actually pretty decent at that as well. So you could use her in the role of nuker, next to that of a sort of control champion to make sure that your team survives if the enemy goes next. Going to take a quick visit back to 2 champions that we already mentioned in the decreased defense section, and those are Siege Hulk with his Thrashing Fit ability, and Sargala, which we will find in the Orcs faction with her Crack Armor ability. They do quite a lot of damage next to being a decreased defense champion. So these 2 guys are fine options for a nuker when you're a little bit further along in the game. Finally, I want to mention an epic from the Sacred Orders faction, and that's Talia. Talia also is a very potent nuker when you build her right. She actually places a 25% attack buff and a 30% increased crit rate buff on herself before attacking all enemies, and she does a lot of damage with this. So if you are looking for an upgrade from the starter champions, you could absolutely take Talia. And now we're going to take a look at a small sample of the god tier nukers that there are in the game, and I could not pass this one over, of course. It's of course Trunda. Trunda is one of the hardest hitting champions in the game by far. So if you get her and you want to upgrade your team to the highest tier possible in Arena damage wise, then you will absolutely be very happy with Trunda, because she hits like a truck. A good alternative from the Dark Elves faction is Ray. Ray is a champion that does a lot of damage as well, and she actually has 3 AoE abilities, making her quite useful if the fight goes on a little bit longer as well. But like you can see here, she has an ability that inflicts 50% more damage against targets under debuffs. And if all goes well, you already have a decreased defense debuff on there. So this ability will be very, very painful for your opponent if your decreased defense managed to land. No need to go far for the next one, and that's Foley. Foley is also one of the champions in this game that hits like an absolute freight train, because his AoE does so much damage that it's insane. But an extra ability that's on here is that enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. So if the reviver of the enemy team survived, then that's all fun and giggles, but they will not be able to revive everyone that died by Foley's attack. So that's incredible. This means that if you get to kill a couple of enemies with this ability, they will absolutely not be coming back. And then the last champion I want to mention, and if you were actually able to hold on to the end, then I applaud you, very good job. Here we go, we're gonna take a look at Kendrathon. And Kendrathon also hits super hard. The chance that he will kill any champions is very, very high. But if he does, it actually makes sure that he can get an extra turn. So this makes him even more insane. So a very good option as an Arena Nuker in your team if you're further along in the game is going to be Kendrathon for sure. So, like I said before, the champions that I named are absolutely not the only options. There are loads of great champions available for the roles that we need. But these are just a selection that I made for you guys so you have an idea what to look for. And if you want to find all champions, like I said, just visit ayumilove.net and take a look at the champions that have certain abilities and make your own composition. Now I want to give you a small example of a fight that works the way that that we discussed today, and we are going to fight this team over here. I will show you what my team is. I have an Arbiter in the speed lead position because of her speed aura, which is even better than Deacon's. So Arbiter is going to provide us with a 30% boost in speed just by her aura. Also, she has the ability to increase our attack and boost our turn meter, so that's great. But my team is actually built that Deacon is the one that goes first. And that means that he will boost our turn meter to go first. Then he will do his decreased defense. We will go into Arbiter, who will boost our turn meter even further and increase our attack. After that we are going to go into Elhain, who is just a plain nuke. And after that I have a Countess Lix, because I was able to combine so many roles in just 2 champions. I was able to add a champion that will be able to lock out the enemy team in case they actually survive the nuke by Elhain. And that is because Countess Lix has an ability that can block active skills from the opponents. So this means that they will just be able to A1. Also, she's in a stun set, so she has a chance to stun them as well. So we're just going to take a look at how this goes. I can start it on auto. I can show you why. It's because I have actually arranged for all the abilities to be done in the right order. So Arbiter will always start with Mentor of Heroes. After that, Deacon will start with Time Compression going into Sweeping Retribution. Elhain will start with her Valley of Death ability, and Countess Lix will do Time Dilation, which is the skill that can block active skills. So, here we go. We're just gonna see how this goes. We have a lower team power, but in this case, I don't think that's going to make a big difference. I think we're going to nuke them straight away. Now let's hope I didn't have too high confidence here. So there we go. What you noticed there was that 2 champions actually survived the nuke, which is not all that surprising perhaps, because Syl is a huge defensive champion and Miscreated Monster has a lot of HP, but Countess Lix was actually able to lock their active abilities. So now this is just going to be an easy fight, because she will not be able to revive anyone and he will not be able to do his AoE. And like you can see, we were actually able to kill these guys very, very easily. So that's the basics of it. So finally, I just want to give you a couple of examples how teams could look like in the beginning of the game and in the middle of the game. So, for example, when you are starting out, then I would strongly recommend creating this team over here. You have a team that consists of 3 farmable champions and your starter, which should be quite easily attainable. And if you set it up like this, then it can work out for you very nicely in the arena. You just need to make sure that Spirit Host will always start with Strengthen. Then you will have Diabolist that will always need to do Positive Charge first. War Maiden will always need to open with Crumbling Blast. And your starter will always need to start with their AoE attack. And the order would be like this. You would want to have Diabolist fastest, then go into Spirit Host, go into War Maiden, and then go into your starter. If you do that, then you have executed this strategy perfectly, and if all goes well, the enemy team will be dead before you know it. For a little bit more of a mid-tier team, this could be a setup that you can use for this strategy. Because then you will have High Katoon, which will need to do Rally the Horde as your opener, and she will need to go first. After that we can go into Seeker, which will need to open with Tailwind, increasing the turn meter even further and placing the increased attack buff. After that, Siege Hulk we want to do Thrashing Fit first, and Dark Helheim will need to start with her AoE. And if you do that, then the strategy will work just like intended. And hopefully the opposing team will not be strong enough to withstand the attack that you will put on them with Dark Helheim. But this is absolutely a good example of a team that is a little bit further along in the game. But just one thing to notice here is that we will have 3 magic affinity champions here. So keep in mind that when you are fighting a full force team, then you might be in a little bit of trouble. But this is something to just keep in mind when you are searching for opponents in Arena. So guys, after watching this movie, you should be well suited to actually take on Arena as a beginner, but also when you're a little bit further along in the game. I hope you guys liked this video. It is absolutely a long one, but if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the channel for more Raid Shadow Legends videos. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!